Firstly, I'm thrilled that I've been asked to speak about this extraordinary film about an extraordinary woman and a rather extraordinary event, if we want to call it that, if you're going to be gracious. I thought, firstly, if Amit is around, Amit, an absolutely warm round of applause for you. Unbelievable what you've put together for the first time. I know the trials and tribulations, but I know what it's doing for everyone. So thank you. Incredible work, you and your team. So I thought I'd start in a very kind of pedantic way by just telling you a little bit more about Eileen Gray. The fact that she was born Irish in 1878. She was landed gentry from her mother's side, and her father was a landscape painter, which is mentioned in the film. But her parents parted ways when she was 11. She studied fine art at the Slade School in London, moved to Paris, where she designed those incredible interiors, furniture, lived through 2 world wars, much heartbreak, oblivion, and then recognition eventually. And she finally died at the wonderful age of 98, having been through almost a century of amazing world events, including 2 world wars. The voice of Eileen Gray, understanding her, getting under her skin, which I think to a large extent this film did. I really enjoyed the cinema as theater format, which I'm sure everyone kind of enjoyed and tuned into. I did wonder about this woman and who she really is, so I did do a little bit of research, though some of her quotes do tell us more. For me, this film was about her free spirit. I loved that quote. I like doing things, but I hate possessing them. Evident in the way she left the house within 2 years of building it. She studied art, but she was an avid maker. She connected the dots of comfort, emotion, and beauty through the furniture she designed, pieces that we've all seen and used, incredibly modern, despite having been designed a century ago. I think that little side table is something that we still use, see, and buy everywhere, including perhaps that Bibendum chair. Other nuggets from 98 Facts About Eileen Gray compiled by the Irish Independent. She was not propelled by her ego. Artistic fulfillment for Gray was a function of the creative act rather than measured in applause or financial gain. Almost every major piece of furniture she designed was for somebody she loved. Her art was neither narcissistic nor motivated by self-expression. A little more about the house. She built this house from 1926 to 29, living at the site and having many conversations with the masons. She was 51 when it was complete. At some point in the film, she says, modern architecture is too intellectual, and she emphasizes comfort and emotion. When I first saw the film, it was hard to understand how and why this home became a battleground for architecture and now a museum. However, it's the little details that make the house what it is. The integration of furniture, thoughtful interior design, and architecture such that every need is fulfilled in a creative, beautiful way. The rounded walls, the walls that stop before the ceiling begins, the niches, the custom-made lights, the stenciled instructions, turn right, turn left, here are the pillows, everything that speaks of inhabitation by people. As the film shows, she built it for her need to internalize in peace, as well as for Bardot's more extroverted life, due to which she finally left the house in 1931, just 2 years after she built it. Itself an amazing act of regaining freedom without possession or ego. The subject of this film is important from two perspectives. How did history forget and then revive its interest in Eileen Gray until 1968? Was it the turning point in world affairs where equality and feminism were beginning to revive history to her story? What propelled this rediscovery after several decades of anonymity? I'd love to highlight the journalists and scholars who dug deeper and revived her authorship of the house, the furniture, as well as all the work that was burned down in her Paris apartment in 1944 by the retreating German army. The revolutionary movements of the 1960s did create a turning point in viewing the world through more democratic lenses, and feminism was one of these. The stories of several important women, Simone de Beauvoir, Frida Kahlo, even Charlotte Perriand, were reclaimed in its wake, and I think Gray is one of these. The second and more relevant question today: why was Corbu obsessed with this house, and why did he paint these murals? Corbu's obsession with the house is legendary and apparent from the film with his statements, "It embraces me with its motherly arms," a statement that will be grist for the mill of the Oedipal complex. I love that scene when Corbu wines and dines Bardot through that trolley, a hilarious scene in the film, and the trip to Siam, all of which led to the outcome that he was allowed to create the murals that have become the point of contention. There can be questions on his motives as an attempt to enhance the house. There's an article, a wonderful one, by Beatriz Colomina, professor at Princeton University School of Architecture, and it's titled, "War on Architecture, E1027. She writes, "Why then did Le Corbusier vandalize the very house he loved? Did he think the murals will enhance it? Certainly not. Le Corbusier had repeatedly stated that the role of the mural in architecture is to destroy the wall, to dematerialize it. In a letter to Vladimir Nekrasov in 1932, he writes, I admit the mural not to enhance a wall, but on the contrary, as a means to violently destroy the wall, to remove from it all sense of stability, of weight, etc. The mural for Le Corbusier is a weapon against architecture, a bomb. But why then to paint on the walls at the risk of killing architecture? He asks in the same letter, and then answers himself. It is when one is pursuing another task, that of telling stories. So what then is the story that he so urgently needs to tell with Graffiti à Cap Martin? Herein lies a story that is relevant to all of us today. A house that perhaps epitomizes the original tenets of the modern movement, where form follows function, where there are no flights of fantasy, no shouting, no declarations of egoistic possibilities, twists, turns, contortations. It's a quiet, intelligent, and emotional house, and its author wished for it to stay that way. Corbu's murals scream out his obsession with the house and the author. Did he resent that her modernism was the real one? The house as a machine for living, but with the emotions of the living? Did he recognize that modernism had cut people out in its quest for the machine aesthetic, and that he was perhaps one of its greatest culprits? Colomina and several other critics today speak of Corbu as the colonist with respect to this house. A colonizer is one who wields power in order to extract. It seems apparent that he was wielding power. One of the murals represents Gray and Bardot intertwined with a third figure, which could be interpreted in many different ways, but certainly with references to her sexuality. Bardot was openly gay. Gray was openly gay, and Bardot is represented as a woman. Kobu and Bardot systematically effaced Gray's authorship in various references to the house, and we saw that to the point that it was considered Bardot's work, and in later years, Kobu propagated it more for his murals than the house. However, and this for me is the crux, if a colonizer wields power to extract, what was he extracting? And for me, the answer is Eileen Gray's persona, the one that validates emotion, the one that creates without the need to possess, the one that designed without the need for validation. Everything that we love about design. And yet, why do egoistic, vengeful men rule the world of design, politics, and life? I leave you with this question.